accordance with the time and space and the particular challenges that we have. We want to be able to look at that tonight, inshallah. God willing, the time allows us to be able to do so. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. When it comes to our interfaith and our intrafaith work, is that dialogue, is that exporting of our faith to other sects within the Muslim Ummah. Intrafaith, Judaic Christian community, the Hindu community, for example, bringing them closer to us and for us to be able to exchange our ideas. Are we under obligation to be able to have this? And if so, which one comes first? Are we more obligated to try to unite the Muslim Ummah, or are we more obligated to try to work with those from Ahl al-Kitab, for example? How do we know which is our priority in which circumstance? So when we invest our resources, when we invest our time and effort, where should our resources be going to? Is it primarily to intra-faith work, to strengthen the unity amongst the Muslim community, or is it to interfaith work, where it comes to the wider society and bringing people together? This is a question that we need to ask. When we do inter and intrafaith work, what are we trying to achieve? You know, in the world today, especially here in the West, there's a term that is thrown out. And you'll often hear that our society is trying to build a tolerant society. Have you heard that term before? We want tolerance between each other. We need to tolerate the immigrants that come here. You know, those who come from Syria and elsewhere. We need to build a tolerant society. Is that what Islam asks of us? Does Islam want us to build tolerance between one another? When we use this isti'amal, when we have this usage of the word tolerance, what comes to mind? I don't know how many of you here are married. Can you just raise your hands for me? Yeah. Well, now Sayyid is waving so furiously because he's just recently got married. So he wants everyone to know. Congratulations, Sayyid. How many people are married here? Yeah? Now, imagine I said to you, you have to tolerate your wife. Your wife should tolerate you. What does the word tolerate mean? It means to put up with someone, doesn't it? I'm sure there are many couples in here that after some length of marriage do end up just tolerating one another. But that's not the way a marriage is supposed to be, correct? It's not meant to be that you just put up with one another. Yeah, you put up with each other's in-laws maybe. Yeah, I'm not going to deny that. But no one goes, you know what, I'm going to tolerate my wife. I'm just going to have it that I'm able to just have it where she's sitting in the same room as me, but nothing more than that. When people say in our society today that we need to have tolerance for one another, actually, does the Islamic idea of a society building program base itself on trying to achieve tolerance? Is that the bar we want to reach when exporting our faith to one another? Actually, there are different terms that we have. We want to build a society not based on tolerance, but based on dignity, on respect, on love for one another, to be able to see the goodness in one another. If my bar of success is tolerance and I fall short of that, where do I really end up with as a society? But if my goal is to build a dignified and honored community based on respect, even if I don't reach all of that, at least some of that is going to be built. When we export our ideas and we base our dialogue, and I bring a priest and I bring the rabbi and I shake hands and I bring the alim or the sheikh from another sect, and we end up talking with each other, is it supposed to be a tick box event? We shake hands, the pictures are taken, we never see each other again. 3 years later, there might be another event that we do in order to celebrate Unity Week of the Prophet. Is that what Tabligh and Da'wah is supposed to be? Is that where we've reached? The reality is that is where we have reached. It's a tick box event for many communities and many different organizations. because the goal is not honor and genuine exchange, dignity building within ourselves. We also have very real problems. We have other challenges that exist in front of us right now when it comes to tabligh and da'wah. For example, we realize that there is the issue now of the rise of the far right and the neo-Nazi movement. When it comes to this type of world where there is so much hatred towards the Muslim community, doesn't it require us to be able to think about how we're spreading our faith strategically? There are many ayat that talk about this. And if you do a tafsir mawdu'i, if you look at the verses of Quran and ask the Quran a question, what is the relationship, for example, between sadaqah and strategic development of a society, you will see there are dozens of ayat that bring this together. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this in depth in the Quran, about where we should be spending our money in order to push back the hatred of those individuals from us and how to bring people closer towards us. This has to be a topic that we delve into, inshallah. So in light of this, we can see that there is much in front of us to talk about. And when we talk about tabligh and da'wah, it is not as simple as sometimes what we have seen, where some just put a stall out, hand some flyers out, maybe do the Hizb al-Tahrir approach or something like that, or the Tablighi Jamaat approach, where it's just on a stall and trying to get people. There has to be something more than this. And this, inshallah, will be what we want to discuss over these coming nights. So let us ask now, when we ask the Quran, what does the Quran tell us about the reasons for the obligations of performing tabligh and da'wah? How did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speak about this, and what are the different categories of reasons that God gave to us for the importance of spreading our faith? And here, inshallah, I have brought with me some slides to be able to begin this discussion. And what I want to be able to do is break them initially into 3 different types of reasons for the performance of tabligh and da'wah. And then inshallah, as we go tomorrow, we will have time to start our series proper and start thinking about some of these topics. So the first reason as to why we have to be involved in tabligh and da'wah is that we've actually been commanded. It's been an amr from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a command to warn others and to spread the message. As an example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in chapter number 6 that He has sent messengers. And then He tells us that by virtue of those messengers, we are also responsible to warn others. So He says the following, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. وَمَا نُرْسِلُ الْمُرْسَلِينَ إِلَّا مُبَشِّرِينَ وَمُنذِرِينَ فَمَنْ آمَنَ وَأَصْلَحَ فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the following. And we send not messengers, but as announcers of good news and givers of warning. Then whoever believes and acts right, improves themselves, reforms themselves, they shall have no fear, nor shall they grieve. Now, this is verse number 48. A couple of verses on, in verse number 51, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now makes a command that we should also be warners. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent warners, but He's also now telling you and I to also be warners. That we have a responsibility to tell others about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, about the day of judgment, about the reasons for their creation. He says the following, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. وَأَنذِرْ بِهِ الَّذِينَ يَخَافُونَ أَنْ يُحْشَرُوا إِلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ لَيْسَ لَهُم مِّن دُونِهِ وَلِيٌّ وَلَا شَفِيعٌ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَّقُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the following, and warn with it, this book, warn with it, this book of Allah, those who fear that they shall be gathered to their Lord. So not only are we being told warn others, we're also being told whom to warn. That we have a group of people other than us that do have a fear They believe in the Day of Judgment. They recognize that they will have to stand before their Lord and present their deeds on the Day of Judgment. There is a target audience here that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding us to engage with. وَأَنذِرْ بِهِ الَّذِينَ يَخَافُونَ أَن يُحْشَرُوا إِلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ. Warn those who fear that they will be gathered to their Lord. There is no guardian for them, nor any intercessor besides Him, but that they may guard against evil. They fear on the Day of Judgment that they will be gathered, and so they may guard against evil, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. Then comes the verse that we will be using as the theme of our entire series. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Imran, verse number 104, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, وَلْتَكُنْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and from amongst you, there should be a party who go on inviting towards khair. There should be a party. Which means that the way in which the community should be structured is that within each community there has to be a group from amongst you whose role it is that they go out and invite. They're focused on external events, external affairs, inviting people towards goodness, meaning towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, towards faith, towards the sanctity of their own souls. And from amongst you, there should be a party who invite towards good and enjoin that which is right and forbid the evil. You'll remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that the community that is the best of communities that have been heralded for mankind. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions only a few verses after this in the Holy Quran. He mentions, Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat lin nas. You are the best of communities that have been heralded for mankind. What's the condition? What's the shart? Ta'maruna bil ma'ruf wa tanhawna 'anil munkar. Similarly here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that you should be enjoining right and forbidding the evil, and these it is that will be successful. So the first reason as to why we are responsible to do tabligh is that we have been commanded to do so. There is a responsibility on us to be able to spread the faith outwards towards other people. The next reason as to why we have to have tabligh and da'wah, and therefore we need to have a theory of how to be able to do it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects those who love Him and love the Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, that we should be assisting the Holy Prophet of Islam. As the Prophet was a warner and a bringer of glad tidings, the expectation upon us is to have those characteristics of those who assist the Prophet. How we assist him is what we're going to talk about. Outwards, online, dealing with government. All of these questions we're going to come to, inshallah. But there is an expectation upon us to be able to assist him. In the verse that speaks about the reason, the mission statement of what the Holy Prophet of Islam is supposed to do, at the end of the verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions about you and I. فَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِهِ. As for those who believe in him, وَعَزَّرُوهُ وَنَصَرُوهُ. They honor the Prophet. They assist the Holy Prophet. وَاتَّبَعَ النُّورَ الَّذِي أُنزِلَ مَعَهُ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. Those who honor and assist, they help the Holy Prophet of Islam and follow the light which has been sent down with him, these it is that will be successful, inshallah. So therefore, the second reason as to why we are supposed to do tabligh is to assist the mission of the Holy Prophet of Islam. The third is very interesting, and it will form the centerpiece of our discussion maybe tomorrow when we have time to go into the first part of our discussion. And the reality is that from our perspective, all other faiths, all other sects, those who don't believe in a faith but they have an ideology, they have spent years developing these ideas, maybe even centuries these ideas have been developed on. None of them are pure. All of them have been corrupted or come from a starting point which is not divine. And therefore it is the responsibility of Islam to assist them in coming closer towards truth, and therefore upon the Muslim to assist those ideologies to come towards truth. Why? Because otherwise, whenever these ideologies are implemented, because sometimes they will be distanced from haqq, and sometimes even greater distanced from haqq, as a result, when they become established, when they become governments, when they become ideologies that spread, they won't be pure, and as a result, they might end up spreading corruption, discord, or misunderstanding. And so it becomes the responsibility of Islam, in its purest sense, to correct those misunderstandings that have existed. Therefore, the Muslim is responsible to correct those misunderstandings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this in a number of times in the Quran. The need of Islam in purifying other faiths, in bringing other faiths towards purity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the following. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ قَالُوا لَن تَمَسَّنَا النَّارُ إِلَّا أَيَّامًا مَعْدُودَاتٍ وَغَرَّهُمْ فِي دِينِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا يَفْتَرُونَ. How phenomenal a verse from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They say, this is because they say, the fire shall not touch us but for a few days. They corrupted their own faith. They misunderstood Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how they might end up on the day of judgment. So what would they say? Fine, if we've done wrong, nothing will happen to us, but maybe the fire will touch us for a number of days. And what they have forged deceives them in the matters of their religion. How they've understood their religion and manipulated and corrupted their own religion, it has deceived them in what they do. Whose responsibility is it to help them re-understand their religion in the purest sense? You'll remember, how many times do we sit down with someone from another faith and we'll say, does your faith really allow you to eat pork? Isn't it mentioned in this verse in the Bible? Doesn't your faith tell you to be able to act like this? But after so many decades and centuries of a secularized ideology, after so many years and generations of corruption being sowed into it, the faith has deceived them in what they do. And now they champion something that really isn't in line of their own faith. Whose responsibility is it to be able to highlight that and bring it back to them to understand their own faith in a purer sense? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, not only do they deceive themselves, but He also mentions another two sets of issues when it comes to other faiths and how they have ended up corrupting themselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Ma'idah, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Ya Ahl al-Kitab, قَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولُنَا يُبَيِّنُ لَكُمْ كَثِيرًا مِمَّا كُنْتُمْ تُخْفُونَ مِنَ الْكِتَابِ وَيَعْفُ عَنْ كَثِيرٍ قَدْ جَاءَكُمْ مِنَ اللَّهِ نُورٌ وَكِتَابٌ مُبِينٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the following. Not only have you deceived yourselves in your religion, He says, O people of the book, now our messenger has come to you. What has he done? Revealing much of what you have hidden. Not only have you deceived yourselves, sometimes there are things which you have outright hidden from yourselves, from the scriptures, and the things that you have disregarded. So sometimes you have deceived yourselves, sometimes you have hidden things from your scriptures, and sometimes you have disregarded things from your scriptures. There certainly has come to you from Allah a light and a clear book. The fact that other faiths have done this, whose responsibility is it for them to be guided? Otherwise, this perpetuates. Otherwise, they are misunderstanding within misunderstandings, the outcome of which is a religion which is far deviated from the one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to them. And so these are the three reasons as to why there is a need for tabligh and da'wah. We are trying to build a better world. We're trying to build a purer world. And ultimately, if we do not do this, then it will be left to others to be able to build that world. But they will be building it on ideologies, on faiths, on sects, that their starting point may sometimes be very different from ours, and as a result, what they call to will be very different from ours. So inshallah, we will be talking about some of these issues. We will talk about interfaith and intrafaith dialogue. We'll be talking about the principles and the goals of these. We'll be talking about spreading our faith online. And how do we deal with that? You know, sometimes we see that there are these chat rooms, these Muslim and Shi'i chat rooms, and nonsense is being talked in there. I'm going to show you sometimes how quickly people misunderstand conversations online. It's not like they're even reading the conversations. They're just talking nonsense and wasting everyone else's time online and sowing more corruption and misdeeds online as opposed to spreading goodness online. We'll talk about dealing with the right wing and the rise of the neo-Nazi movement. We will talk about the issues when it comes to Zionists and to what extent are we permitted, if at all, to even be able to work with the Zionist lobby. Why? Because there is much infiltration within our communities. Sometimes we don't realize it, but there are those who are paid to infiltrate, and we need to know what are our red lines. Are we supposed to stand, hug everyone, shake hands with everyone? Or is it that there have to be red lines before we engage with certain groups and certain issues? One of the big conversations we're going to have, inshallah, is around epistemology. Take one of the issues around RSE. Have you all heard of the RSE issue? Everyone knows of the religious and sex education issues. Often the Muslim community wants to speak about their view on homosexuality. And we're often shouted down. And we don't yet know how to be able to deal with this. You've all seen that school in Birmingham. People are standing outside it. And we're not sure how to deal with it. Are we okay to say it's a sin? Are we okay to have these programs? Are we okay to say, let's stand up for the rights of the LGBTQ community? We don't actually know very much. And why? Because we're on the back foot. And sometimes when our ulama want to be able to speak about it from the pulpit, they know that the moment that that video goes out, the Daily Mail, the Sun, all of those papers are going to show radical imam is against human rights. So now even the sheikh cannot speak about it properly because he's afraid of being able to talk about it. The reality is we live in a different epistemology. We believe different starting points. You and I believe in a soul and an afterlife. What happens when you engage with someone who doesn't believe in the same ethical code as you and me? They don't believe in God. They don't believe it's a sin. Everyone can love one another. What difference does it make to you? Why do you want to get involved in what people do? How does it affect you if two men get married? They will ask. And so we put ourselves on the back foot because we don't know how to deal with it. Why? Because we're having two different conversations. One person is speaking from the perspective of God. One person is speaking from the perspective of complete freedom and liberalism. How do we discuss such sensitive topics with people who think very differently to you and I? These will be one of the topics that we need to come up with. Julus and our processions. What happens when we want to take out these processions and walk on the streets? To what extent is this positive for us? And how do we go about doing this? Are we supposed to be chanting our slogans in Urdu? Are we supposed to be doing ma'tam bare-chested on the streets? Some communities do this. Some communities oppose this. How do we deal with some of these things? What happens when there's a terrorist attack? Are we supposed to be apologetic? At what time is apologetics useful? What is the theory of apologetics? We'll go into the history of apologetics and look at the first scholar to bring about an apologetic movement to his benefit, Justin Martyr, in the 1st and 2nd century after Jesus Christ, alayhi salam. And inshallah, we want to be able to talk about all of these issues and think about the challenges that we have in our own time. For example, We have the challenges now coming up in front of us. You know what the next big challenge is going to be in our Muslim community? The ex-Muslim identity. You know those individuals that have left Islam and they want to parade themselves and they're being shown off? Maryam Namazi shows them off. Majid Nawaz shows them off. Muhammad Tawheedi shows them off. And what happens? They're paraded as the example for the rest of us all to follow. How do we deal with these people? How do we engage with these sorts of people? And what happens when this movement becomes bigger and bigger in our own time? How do we deal with these challenges? In fact, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi, has the hadith where he says, أَعْرَفُ النَّاسِ بِالزَّمَانِ مَنْ لَمْ يَتَعَجَّبْ مِنْ أَحْدَاثِهِ. He who is most aware of the times in which he lives in would not be surprised and overcome by the events therein. If we understand the world that we live in, we'll be in a better position to think about how we spread our faith to other than us outside of the four walls of the Husayniyah. Inshallah, from tomorrow night, we will look at the topic of what were the challenges in Mecca and in Medina, and therefore we'll be able to understand the relativity of how the Prophet dealt with various different societies. That will allow us to be able to think about the society that we live in, and then to be able to create a theory of tabligh off the back of that. Walhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahumma ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina Muhammad wa alihi at-tahirin. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the appearance of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, to allow us to be alongside him at all times in our life and in our death. If we are to pass away from this world before his coming, Ya Allah, raise us from our graves so that we can partake in the victories of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Ya Allah, there are many people around the world going through such desperate times, those people in a state of war, oppression, poverty, homelessness, disease and disaster. Grant them all safety, security and victory for the sake of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Ya Allah, it is the month of Ramadan. We wish to be able to fast better, to be able to recite the Quran better. Help us to achieve all of our goals in this holy month. And we ask you, Ya Allah, make this discussion fruitful so that our communities can go from strength to strength and inshallah achieve the things that it wants to achieve in honor of the Imam of our time, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam. Wassalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We had the wilada of our second Imam a few days ago in honor of our second Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba. Please conclude this discussion with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.